Okay, it started.
Mhm.
All right. So, hi everyone. It's me, Uzma Azam from Healing House, and basically the founder of Healing House and clinical psychologist, NLP practitioner, and timeline therapist. Today, we are talking about an amazing and a hot topic of these days, that is the burnout. And we have such an amazing and beautiful guest with us, that is Heather. So,
Ah,
welcome, Heather, to the show.
thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I love being here.
Thank you so much. So, Heather, first of all, thank you so much for giving such an amazing time. And, thank you so much for agreeing basically to be my guest.
Anytime.
And I hope people will like you a lot. And you are doing such an amazing job. I really appreciate that as well.
Oh,
And first of all, I would love to have your detailed introduction. I know you, but my audience might not know you in a very detail. So I would love to have your introduction first of all.
oh, no problem. So, hi everyone. I'm Heather Broderick, and I am a life and leadership coach. And I work specifically with women, driven women, helping them get out of toxic work environments, overcome burnout, and find fulfillment through their careers. Um, so it's a really interesting topic today because workplace well-being is really important now, and there's been a big push in workplace well-being, especially since COVID. So I think now that people are starting to return to the office, these issues are coming back again. So
Mm. That's so true. And as you just have mentioned, the work has been started and it's quite, a bit overwhelmed after COVID specifically. And when we say overwhelmed, continuing to that, I would definitely, my first question would be here that how will you define burnout? What exactly is that?
So burnout is basically there's 5 stages to stress. So it's all related to stress. And the first stage is when you're faced with any kind of danger or perceived danger, and that's when your fight and flight mechanism is alerted to tell you danger is here, and your body reacts in with ways it increases the cortisol so that it can protect you from the danger. That's the first stage. If that danger goes away, that's no problem. If the danger stays, that then turns into the kind of damage control alarm stage, where you kind of have this overload of cortisol in your body and lots of your systems are shut down so that you can just focus on survival. If that continues, normally in a normal situation, the stress of the danger would go away. If that doesn't go away, you then enter into the kind of adaptation phase where your body is telling your mind, this is how it is. I have to adapt to live this way with this heightened level of stress. And the last stage of that, if you're in that adaptation phase for a long time, which is where you become irritable, overwhelmed, overthinking, you start to have some physiological kind of repercussions of stress. If you're in that stage for a prolonged period of time, that's when you get to burnout. So it's the very last stage of stress.
All right. So yeah, that's basically, when the stress reaches to certain level where you get, overwhelmed with so many things, and like just you have mentioned about the adaptation, the cortisol, it is basically layers by layers. So yeah, that's okay. So that basically is burnout. So if you just have mentioned that there's a burnout types as well, that you have mentioned some levels of burnout. So if we talk specifically about the types of burnout, like work burnout or the emotional burnout, what does that mean? Are there certain types or categories of burnout as well?
Not really, to be honest. Burnout is burnout. And it can be triggered, you're right, it can be triggered by lots of different things. For some people, it's work. For some people, it's financial problems. For some people, it's lots of small things, lots and lots and lots of different areas of their life, and it just gets piled on and on their shoulders. For some people, it's relationships. It could be a marriage problem or breakdown. It could be grief. There's so many things that can trigger the stress, because stress like I said earlier, is just danger to your perceived danger to your body. There's lots of things that can cause that, but there's not different types of burnout as such. Once you're in burnout, it's a physiological state that you're in, kind of an emotional, it's an emotional, mental, and physiological response to chronic stress. So once you're in that phase, it doesn't really matter what the triggers were. You're just in burnout, and then your focus has to be recovery from that.
Okay, so you basically mean, as you just have mentioned, that burnout is a physiological state, and it includes a kind of, the emotional and the behavioral and physiological, every aspect. It's just burnout. You are totally burnout. So is there any kind of emotional or psychological story behind burnout?
In terms of like the symptoms, or in terms how it starts? Do you mean
in both, either the start or the symptoms?
Well, like I said before, like the start can be very different for lots of different people. And what causes one person stress might not cause somebody else stress. So it's very personal to that person. And everyone has a different threshold of how much stress they can tolerate as well and still function, So it could really be anything, because like I said, stress is just perceived danger. So if you're constantly in that fight and flight mode for too long, your body will start showing some physiological and psychological what are they called, like
symptoms or aspects.
Symptoms of that. So psychologically, it would be things like overthinking, it would be heightened anxiety, it would be the struggling with overwhelm, and all those things that happen in your mind. So a lot of sleep issues will come from there as well, from all the overthinking. There'll be disturbances in your sleep, and then because of that leads to the physiological symptoms such as exhaustion, extreme fatigue, migraines, headaches, skin problems. So it kind of is like, it starts off in your mind, and then it comes out, it presents itself physiologically as well.
Okay. All right, so it is basically a kind of interlinked. Both will be present. It is not like we can distinguish between both, but it can work, what we call it, instantly together. Either it is physiological, or can we say it this way, that burnout is basically having a lot of things at a time in one plate in front of you.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is with stress, why it's so dangerous, is that some people don't feel stressed. They're just presenting with symptoms such as constant migraines, such as not sleeping. They might have changes in their weight, so they're gaining weight or losing weight. They might start having skin problems like acne or rosacea, and they don't know why. They're like, oh no, I'm not stressed. I can cope with everything. But when you peel it back, then you realize actually there's a lot going on in other things. I always discuss and talk about stress like blood pressure. It's something you can't see. You have no idea if your blood pressure is high or low. And stress can sometimes be like that. It's the physical symptoms that make you think, oh, maybe I am stressed. I mean, this is the adaptation phase. This is before it gets to burnout. Because when you're burnt out, you would know.
All right. So can we, thank you so much for sharing this. That was an amazing point, Heather. So I will ask another question now, that if, can we say in this way that stress is the initial symptom or the trigger towards the burnout? Definitely. Can we put it that way?
Exactly. Yeah. It's always starts with stress of a low level. And in a normal, healthy environment, that stress would dissipate. It would go away, and it's completely normal for your body. That's your natural response system back from the beginning of time, in prehistoric times, when there was a perceived danger of a bear or perceived danger of a fire, that's what your body did. It would send the extra cortisol so that you can fight off the danger. But in the meantime, a lot of your bodily functions shut down so that your body and your brain has the energy to fight that off. So what you find is that people struggle who are stressed, they might struggle with things like infertility, because your reproductive system just does not work if you are constantly in a state of stress. It will not produce an embryo. It won't work. Things like weight loss, if you're trying to lose weight and you're in a constant state of stress where that cortisol is high, you physically cannot lose weight no matter how you try. So yeah, so it really affects lots of different areas of life, but you're right, like the initial trigger is always stress. It's just hard to sometimes identify that. Where did the stress come from? Was it work? Is it money? Is it family, health?
All right. So you mean the indicators are different for every person, you know, because there are individual differences. So the indicators must be different. And what cause exactly the stress can lead towards the burnout. And exactly, you just mentioned the point that, you know, people are unable to identify it, basically, you know, you just have mentioned that. So my next question is totally related to that how a person can basically identify the burnout state in him or her, because people find it quite difficult to identify it.
Yeah, and sometimes, because I said already that a lot of the time the emotional stress state turns to physiological issues, that a lot of people with stress will go to the doctors with physiological problems like back pain, chronic headaches, chronic pains, chronic migraines, things like a lot of intestinal or digestive issues in the gut. A lot of that, things like I can't say that word, I can't say that word, but there's lots of stomach issues that can be caused by stress. And you would go to the doctor thinking, oh, I've got this, because that's what you see. But the underlying issue can be stress, and it will be stress. But because it's hard to identify, and it's like you said, you know, there's things that everyone's threshold is so different, that someone might have to what me and you perceive as a huge problem, but actually deal with it really well and not be massively stressed about it. And then there's people who have small issues, to you and me might be a small issue, but in their perception, it's massively overwhelming and causing them extreme stress. So it's so different and so personal for everyone.
All right, yeah, that's so true, because again the individual differences are there. But if I ask you exactly, like, if you can put some example, any one example, because you are an expert in it and you must you know, you deal with so many people and so many cases with that. So if you can put any one example for the emotional burnout, so my audience can exactly know that a person who is at burnout, emotional burnout, basically, how does they feel and how does they behave certain way.
So the first thing you might notice would be mood changes. So your personality might change a little bit. You might become moody if you're not normally moody. You might become impatient or snappy or irritable when you're maybe not normally like that. You might get more angry than normal. So you're maybe having more arguments, or you're causing problems with people that you know or at work because you just can't control the anger. And then it's also that mental fog. There'll be a massive lack of concentration, of focus. And then with that, you've got things like the absolute exhaustion, just no energy at all, absolute chronic fatigue. But with that normally comes an inability to sleep or insomnia. So it's like a cycle that's really hard to get out of. Yeah. And then the last thing I would say in terms of emotionally would be that if you are finding yourself in a place where you don't find the joy in the things that you used to, it's probably an underlying reason. It could be stress, maybe something else, but it could be that start of that burnout phase, where if you normally love socializing with your friends and you've become socially withdrawn, or if you normally love going for walks and exercising and you don't want to do that anymore, that could be also a sign that something is wrong.
So exactly, we can conclude it in such a way, the emotional burnout symptom, like basically it is like the sudden changes and the moods and behaviors are the basic symptoms and signs for the burnout. Am I right?
Exactly, yeah. And it might be like that you're like this one day and then the next day you're not, or it might just be that you notice over time you're just
All
reacting
right.
to things differently, because that stage of getting from the fight and flight to burnout is normally quite a
Okay.
long, prolonged
Yeah.
period anyway, you know.
Yeah, because we are talking about basically the emotional aspect as well and the physical. There must be so many layers that is making and actually causing it. So yeah, it must take time, and it's like kind of, when we call it a healing journey.
Mhm.
Healing is a journey. I think burnout itself is the entire journey. From stress to
Yeah,
burnout, it's a whole kind of negative journey though, but a journey. So
exactly.
I think it is that way as well. All right. So I think we have discussed some major things in it and put it in example as well. But Hidra, I would love if you give some, strategies to the people out there, to my audience specifically, that how they can basically deal with the burnout.
So yeah, definitely. When you get to that stage of burnout, it is actually very dangerous, because it really does elevate your risk of severe diseases like heart disease, cancer, stroke. So it's really important that you try to find some strategies to reduce that burnout. And it actually can take a minimum of 11 weeks to get recovery from
Mm.
burnout. So it's actually is still a very long process once you even
Mm.
start working on recovery. But
Okay.
I would say my top 5 tips to recover from burnout if you are nearing that stage or in that phase. The first one would be to know and identify your triggers. So if you know that you
Mm.
get really triggered by going to work, it might be that you just need to take some time off for a while. If you know that there's
Mm.
somebody in your family or a relationship issue, it might be that you just distance yourself from that person until you feel more mentally strong. Um,
Mm.
so know what causes you to feel
Yeah.
stressed. That's the first
All
one.
right. Yeah.
The second one would be you need to find a way to release your stress. So, and that's going to be different
Mm.
for everyone. So, it might be journaling, it might be meditation, it might be
Mm.
exercise, it might just be silence and alone time. Everyone is so different, but
Mm.
find a way of kind of releasing that and having time for you to process what you're going through.
Okay.
That would be number 2. Number
All
th-
right. So me.
sorry.
Yeah. Okay. I got your point.
And then 3 would be find a support system. So find some help either through family, friends, colleagues, people who listen to you, or that might actually be professional help, like a psychologist, psychotherapist, a coach, whoever that might be, but somebody who supports you, understands you, and helps guide you through that. That would be number 3.
Mm.
Number 4 would be, if possible, and this is hard, if possible, exercise. Exercise is such a really good antidepressant, and a stress has a lot of similar symptoms to depression.
Yeah.
So if you can even just get out and move for 10 minutes of the day, it doesn't have to be demanding. It could just be a walk. It could be in the garden. It could be walking your dog. It could be just stretching. But moving your body, physiologically moving, makes you change your state mentally. So it's
Okay.
really, really good. Even just 5 or 10 minutes, you'll notice a difference. But I do know that's hard when you're in that state of having no energy, no focus, and feeling exhausted all the time. And the last one, my last tip would be know your boundaries. Draw boundaries. So if you know, for example, that you need to get 6 or 7 hours sleep a night, draw that boundary with
Mm.
yourself that you have to be in bed by that time. If there is someone in your circle who is draining you negatively, or they
Mm.
actually are a trigger for your stress, draw the boundary
Yeah.
that you don't want to spend as much time as you used to spend with them. But know yourself and know what works for you, because you have to look after yourself, you know, be selfish, be
True.
selfish. You've got to get
Yeah.
yourself out of this, because health wise, it's really dangerous.
Hmm. Okay, so that's so true, and thank you so much basically for giving this amazing tips. I think this has covered the entire system, and these are so important because I usually see people when I tell them to have some time for them, me time, we call it me time,
Yeah.
when it's a self time, when it's so, self-care and me time and self-love, they
Mhm.
usually perceive it a luxurious thing. They
Yeah.
think a me time can be going on a 11 or 12 days trip to northern area or some this kind of thing, and they just tell you that I cannot afford it, stuff like that. And I
Mm.
tell them, can you afford only 11 minutes to take some deep breaths?
Yeah.
That is time. Okay, it requires nothing. Oxygen is totally free of
Yeah.
cost. Just breathe. All right.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for sharing this as well, because I think the meaningful, I think Earth is a mother Earth, and it
Mhm.
has everything if you just have some time for yourself. And you just have mentioned such an amazing point, the last point, because when we talk about boundaries and setting boundaries, we usually set it, in aspect of the relationships. But you
Mm.
just mentioned a point that boundaries are actually something you can set for yourself. Any aspect of, there's a wheel of life, and any certain aspect of wheel of life can be set, so thank you so much for sharing this as well. And it's just an amazing point, and I would definitely go for my last question. And thank you so much for sharing this. How, you just mentioned about the triggers and the aspects of burnout, but if we just say about the recovery process, and how much chances of any person is there to recover from the burnout? Will that be obviously, again, there are individual differences, I understand that it will take time differently.
Mhm.
But if I ask the minimum, maximum, or average time period, people usually ask you how much time will take to heal. So what do you say? How much time it will take for a person to recover from a burnout when they actually work on themselves, not the ones who don't
Yeah.
work on themselves?
Yeah.
Okay?
And that's important. Yeah, I think that the minimum really is 3 months. And then I would say the average is about a year. It can take a long time, because I think by the time people have got to that stage, it's severe. You know,
Hmm.
the and it might be that they're taking prolonged time off sick from work. It might be that their marriage has completely
Hmm.
been ruined. So on top of that, there's going to be other issues there to deal with that make it harder, because it's such a severe kind of result of stress for so long. But it's not even just
Yeah.
physically that it has the problems, it can cause so much emotional and mental damage as well.
Mhm.
So I'd say
That's
three
true.
months is the quickest. A year is about average, but it can honestly, like you said, if they don't work on themselves, it can go on for a long time. So for example,
Yeah.
if work is the cause of stress, and that person just keeps going to work because they need the money, and they need the money and they have to support their family, and they go to work, it's very rare that that's going to go away. So
Yeah.
like you
That's
said, you have to kind of take that effort to know your triggers and be brave to step away, but within boundaries that are doable for your lifestyle. You know, you can't just quit work. Everyone can't just quit work. You have to find a way of taking like maybe a certain amount of time and then going back, reduce time or something, so that you still feel like you're making an effort to recover. But it's so
yeah.
different for everyone, like you said.
Yeah, that's so true. And in usually, if I when I read books, specifically, in our religion, it is said that a person who helps him or herself, the God helps him or herself.
Uh,
The gods help him and her. If you do not work on yourself and do not take a stand for yourself, no one is going to help you out. that is you at the end, so
Yeah.
yeah, that's an amazing point. And thank you so much, Heather, for giving such an amazing time, and thank you so much for cooperating a lot.
Oh, it's fine. It's been lovely. It was so nice
Yeah,
meeting you and being on your show.
thank you so much. It was lovely having you. And for sure, we will stay connected and have some amazing time in future as well. So thank you so much for being in my show. Thank you so much, Heather.
Definitely. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Bye.